Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Live Free, Ride Free. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times bestselling author of The Horse Boy and The Long Ride Home. Before I jump in with today's guest, I want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience, for helping to make this happen. I have a request. If you like what we do here, please give it a thumbs up, like, subscribe, tell a friend. It really, really helps us to make the progress. To find out about our certification courses, online video libraries, books, and other courses, please go to rupertisaacson.com. So now let's jump in. Welcome back. As always, I've got someone very exciting. This is Denise Byron, and some of you may know her from podcasts with, for example, Warwick Schiller and others, and she's sort of become the horse person's astrologer in a strange way. And I was lucky enough to meet Denise at Warwick Schiller's Journey On Summit in England a year and a half or so ago. And we were both speakers there. And I'm always a little bit afraid when I meet astrology witchy people, because I always think they're going to see right through me and see what an imposter I am in every way. And so I tend to run and hide in other parts of the building. But then I met Denise and found that, in fact, no, she was very warm and empathetic. And so I've worked up the courage to have her on the show, and therefore to ask her all the sort of astrology type questions, particularly from a horseman's perspective, that I think a lot of us would like to ask, but often feel a bit shy to. So Denise, thank you for coming on. Can you tell us who you are and sort of why you are and how you came to be as you are?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, like you, I am a curious person. So that's the who of who I am. I'm curious. I want to learn as much as I can. I want to be present. How I came to be doing the work that I do starts when I was very young. So it's a long story, but I'll try to do my best to make it concise. When I was quite young, I just loved to look at the sky. Like all kids, right? Lay on the ground, look at the stars, watch what's happening around us. And that feeling of wonderment never left. It just never left. And when I was 8 years old, and this is a different part of the story, but all combined, my grandmother died, and she was very, very much a part of my life. A beautiful woman, very kind, very loving, gone way too young, of course. But the night she died, I didn't realize she was dying. She showed up in my room, and we lived 3,000 miles apart.
Where were you?
So I
And
was
where
in
were you?
California, and she
Okay.
was in New York.
Yeah.
And there she was. And I thought, grandma's visiting. Cool. And then I woke up the next morning, or got up the next morning, and my mother had to tell me that she had died. And I was very distraught. I was only 8. So maybe I was even 7 or 8. And I knew that death was bad in some form. Like I knew I was going to miss. Was it bad? No, not really bad, but something had changed, that everyone was sad. And I had had cats pass before, and dogs. And so I knew that death was something that you should realize. Side note, having me on a podcast means we're going to talk about death at some point. This is just a normal thing. So death meant something very significant. And I knew that I was going to miss seeing my grandmother in person. That being said, I was somewhat bemused at the fact that I could actually talk to her. So, of course, I said that to my mother. I said, well, whatever words my 8-year-old self said, I understand she's gone, but she's in my room.
Okay.
And fortunately, my mother understood, because my mother had a very similar gift in that way as well. So
put her broomstick in the corner and said,
Yeah, she
"Now
didn't
listen,
quite
let me
go
tell you of
that
your
far, but
destiny, my child."
yeah. I think it would have been better if all the women had just done that, actually. It would have just been a lot easier to just, but not so much during that time, actually, I will say, from a more serious point of view.
Mm.
Women really have had to struggle to be themselves over the years. That is actually true. Anyway, so talking to my grandmother, starting to notice things are a little different, starting to see other things that apparently other people can't see.
Quick pause
Yes.
question. So she doesn't just show up in your room that one time and disappears.
Oh no,
She
she's
shows
with
that
me
she
all the
starts showing up
time.
regularly and
Yeah.
saying, and what does she say? Does she say, clean your room? Does she
No.
say, you should visit the dentist more often? Does she say, the universe is composed of love? Does she say, what does she say?
I love those questions because later on, I have to say, people will say all kinds of things. But at that moment in time, what was happening was this sheer, extraordinary energy of love,
Mm,
because that's what I knew my grandmother to be. She was the person who would hold me, hug me, teach me how to crochet, go for a walk with me. And so there wasn't as much conversation at that moment in time. It was just a feeling
mm,
of being held, that no matter what, I was going to be safe, which again was an important, very important message going forward in my life from that time and on. So having that energy there, having her energy with me opened up the doors to other things. So I was living a childhood where, and the Irish side, I was living a childhood where there were fairies and there were, we talked to all the animals. It was really normal. You talk to the bird, you talk to the cat, you talk to the cow, you talk to the horse. Very normal in my childhood. When it became not normal was a little bit later,
mm,
going into high school, starting to realize other people had not lived like this. So
mm,
starting to shut down. And I think this is a story I would imagine almost every single one of your listeners has. There's a certain point where the shutting down starts to happen. Sometimes it's sooner. In
mm,
my case, it was just a little later, which gave me more time to normalize it and to realize from the brain, oh, this might not be appropriate for this setting, so I'm going to dial it back. So I knew early on that there were messages that wanted to come through. There were loved ones on the other side, and that the stars in particular held messages. And now I will actually answer your question, I think. My brain when I was young it's wired differently. So I couldn't read until I was much older, probably 8 or 9. And so hieroglyphics actually became a language. So you have to think of the time. So late 60s, early 70s, there's all of this energy around the Rosetta Stone and all of the hieroglyphics
all the new
being,
agey stuff is happening in
yeah,
particular.
yeah, it's all happening. So it was normal to see hieroglyphics show up, National Geographic, whatever.
Right.
And they made sense to me. My brain could understand the visual of a symbol, but I couldn't understand how letters and words on a page worked. So I plastered my bedroom with pictures of planets and hieroglyphics and that was my world. And then music, and I don't know if you play, do you play a musical
I
instrument?
do a bit, yeah.
Yeah. So, when you're reading music, you're looking at symbols, and the symbols, they speak, they have energy. They tell you, okay, I play the piano. So press this note and then press it soft or press it hard, depending on what you see
Hmm.
on the sheet music. So my brain was really wired for symbols.
Okay.
So next part of the story. My mother decides to become an amateur astrologer because it's the 70s. And
Right.
Linda Goodman has written a great book, Star Signs, and then her other sun signs and love signs. And so my
Mm.
mother's into this. So she
And quick
becomes an
question, just before you go
yeah.
on with your mother. Is your
Yeah.
grandmother showing up nightly? does it begin to fade? If so, at what point does it begin to
Yeah.
fade?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
She was there every day for a very, very long time, to the point where my my one uncle who's passed, actually all my uncles have passed now, but the one uncle, he would say, "So, have you heard from Grandma Gertais? Have you heard from her?" Yeah, every day. So it became kind of like this. I realize now they had to make light of it because it was a little scary for a lot of people. Like, is she a little weird? What's happening? You know, is she okay? So anyway, yes, she showed up for many years every day. And honestly,
Into your past puberty?
oh yes.
Okay.
Oh yes. Into my 20s and 30s. I
Okay.
would say now I can access her. That's how I would say it. I can go to that level of energy that was my grandmother, and I can access that energy.
I
But
can
I've
imagine you went,
often,
but around the time you start getting into boys saying, Grandma, can you
yeah,
look the
well,
other way?
yeah, okay. So good question. You land on a great question that everybody wants to know. Everybody wants to know, do they spy on you? Okay, everyone wants to know this. You have to tell them not to. I have a great story. Can we go into the
Do you want
rated R section?
do because it's what everybody wants to know, and they should know.
Everybody
And
wants
then
to
we'll go
know
back to your
this.
mum being an amateur astrologer. Yeah. Okay. Go on.
Okay, we'll come back to that. This is more fun. I mean, it's
Yeah. Sure.
great. The whole astrology thing is what I do, but this is another part of my work.
Astrology,
So,
shmology. Let's go to R
yeah,
rated.
yeah, yeah. So my first mentor, an incredible woman, I'm going to tell you this story because this is where I learned it. But at this time, I'm 21 years old. So I don't know anything about any of this. This has just been my life. My grandmother's with me. I mean, I have to say, I kissed a lot of boys. So if she was there, I just didn't pay attention
Right, but
because
she never commented on it.
she did not comment. She was always there, just,
Mm.
and again, did we have conversations? We did have conversations. They often looked like, what am I going to do? And she'd say, you're going to be safe. And once in a while, she would give, and this answers another question that people often ask too. She would give me information that would help me discern, but I had to make my own decision. She did
Mhm.
not tell me what to do. She would just be there as this added bonus,
Mhm.
as an added consciousness, if you were,
Mhm.
just something like that. So anyway, my first mentor, she was shared with us that you had to create boundaries because when she was an incredible psychic. She worked with police departments helping find children, actually.
Mhm.
And I mean, it was the 70s in California was a really tough time, unfortunately, in that realm,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
did a great job doing that work. And she said when she married her second husband, so her husband died, and then their best friends, the wife died. And then they ended up getting together. They had like 8 children between them. They ended up getting together. And one night, they were in the bedroom and she looked up and both of the spouses who had passed on were watching. And she said, "No." And then, "No, you just say no. You have to go now. This is my sacred space." And they leave.
Right.
But you have to tell them sometimes, she said. So ever since then, I have made it very clear, no one in the bedroom, no one in the bathroom. Very clear. Unless it's an emergency of
Yeah.
some kind,
Yeah.
then no, wait.
Yeah.
And also, many years later, I do have, and I teach this to a lot of people. I do have what I call gatekeepers, and I was taught that by another mentor of mine. And the gatekeepers can come in many forms, but I
Mm.
ask my gatekeepers they handle things. If something needs to get in the middle of the night, they can wake me up. But
Mm.
it really has to be an emergency. And I've
Absolutely.
had those. I mean, there are people, there are souls, there are spirits that need support. And so they will come in. But anyway, so yes, the truth is they can see you. And the truth is you do need to set a boundary. So
Well,
it's really
you know what
boundary
I
setting.
feel. I've always felt about that is a why would I mind? Because I imagine that anyone who's within the fields of consciousness is so beyond any sort of
They are so
12-year-old
beyond.
judgment thing that, I mean, any
Yeah.
more than I would be watching my horses or something.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but the
Yeah.
but
It's
the
just
the, the
my
other thing
comfort. Yeah.
is that I've always had the absolute feeling that anyone who is within the fields of consciousness who's aware of me in that way from another, other dimension, perhaps they've died, is beneficent. They're not here to do anything other than help.
Yes.
And those sorts of adolescent human judgments are not relevant to that state of being. So I am in no way worried, you know.
Yeah, I
Uh,
wouldn't worry.
yeah, but it's just humorous,
It
one
is
has to
so humorous
crack a
because it's
joke because
our
yeah,
response. Like this,
yeah,
I'm like,
it's kind of not really
privacy,
relevant.
privacy comes from being an oldest child too. It's just like, privacy, please. It's that, I would, yeah. So anyway, it's an amazing, I love how you explain it too and your own experience, because the other realms, they are profound.
Mm,
And there are definitely energies that are not invited. And I make that very clear.
mm,
There are beings that have passed over that I may not want to have a connection with. So I set up that boundary.
mm.
And, but most often, it always comes down to everything kind of comes down to the same message. Everything comes down to one message. And that is all there really is. And I don't want to sound like a song, but that it's just love. Everything
Indeed.
is love.
Oh no, you're
That is
preaching to the
it.
converted, and I had my own death experience, which we can talk about in a minute.
Mhm.
So I'm 100% with you on that. And I think there's a reason why in every spiritual tradition in the world, every single one, even if they get certain things wrong, the underlying message is always, it's love.
Yeah.
This we know, this we know to our, to to whatever is beyond ourselves. We know it in our mitochondria. We know it to be true.
Yes. Yes.
But okay, your mum decides she wants to become an amateur astrologer, but what you've been talking about in our little digression here has been more about being psychic than being an astrologer.
Mhm.
And of course, they're not always the same thing, right?
Mhm.
Not everyone who's psychic is an astrologer. Not everyone who's an astrologer is psychic. There can be, I guess, a
Mhm.
logical crossover, but
Yeah.
it's by no means a certainty, right? So you're aware of your grandmother, and this lasts, into your young adulthood. And I presume at a certain point, she's not the only one. But
That's
your mum, you also mentioned siblings. You said you're the
Mhm.
oldest child. Is this kind of way of looking at the world and being in the world also with your siblings? And is it also with your mother? And is it also with your father? Or are you feeling, no, I'm kind of a bit alone in this?
That's a good question also. Um, hmm. I would say that I felt supported to grow along my own path in that one way. And so it wasn't that I was not supported. I did feel alone though. And my brother and sister, I was much older. So by the time I started to shut things down, they were just beginning to grow up and they were still quite young. So they did not know that part of me probably until later
Okay.
because, again, surviving in school was a
Sure.
primary
Yeah.
focus at the time. And my brother and sister are extraordinary humans. And I've come to I have this thought, I haven't actually shared it with them, so I can share it now, that we each have taken a branch of something within the family line. My sister is an extraordinary artist. She is a gifted chocolatier. She is a writer. She is very, very creative. And I feel like she has that creative branch and she's really focused there. And then my brother is a wonderful professor of East Asian history. And so he took the very intellectual route and through his own neurodiversity, again, all of us have it in our family. and we all had to somehow find a way to get through school, and we all did pretty well. He chose to go even further and move into that intellectual realm. So he's taking the intellectual branch, and they each have their own spirituality for sure, but that's not their focus. And I ended up going into education and teaching, but the spiritual branch was mine. I could feel it. That's what I was being called to all along. So then I made that the focus. And yeah, it's been interesting to look back and see how each of it, we are all very, very different. They love me. They think I'm weird, and they love me. They're wonderful siblings in that respect. So we all respect each other, and we are all very different.
Okay. So, now your mum gets into amateur astrology. It's the 70s. All those Linda Goodman books are coming out, as we know.
Yes.
Go on.
Okay. So I grow up in a household at that point where my mother's doing astrology the old fashioned way before we had computers, drawing everything by hand and casting the charts. And I'm watching this, kind of living in this soup. And I don't know if she was talking to herself or she was talking to me, but you know how when we're learning and we're talking through something, so I'm absorbing and I'm hearing and listening. I've eventually learned how to read. I think I'm maybe 8 or 9. And the minute the key unlocked and I was able to understand how letters and words worked, I could read at a higher level than my age. So all of a sudden, everything just unlocked. So I started reading the astrology books. I started reading all her past life books. I started reading, Edgar Cayce and all the ones from the 70s, obviously. And
Just to do a quick aside, those who do not know who Edgar Cayce was, he was known as the Sleeping Prophet, and he lived in Virginia Beach in the early part of the 20th century, and he would go into a profound state of trance, sleep, and come out with stuff that was often very helpful, sometimes prophetic, often turned out to be true. And he is one of if you've ever heard the term Akashic record, this idea that all sort of knowledge is stored out in some other field that we can tap into, that really to a large degree in the 20th century starts with him. Of course, he's not the only bloke on the planet ever to come up to this conclusion, but nonetheless, Edgar Cayce is very interesting. If you want to know more, tons of it on YouTube. Okay, back to you.
Great. Okay. I love the history lessons. They're so important because, you and I are not too far apart in age. I'm a little bit older, but we're not that far apart in age. And so we have some similarities.
So you're 28. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're, I think, what, 20?
Well, I never made it mentally much past 3. So yeah.
Exactly. I have a thought, but I'm not going to go there yet. So anyway, I have a thought. So anyway, so I lived in this soup. I started reading. Okay. Like I said, I started to shut things down a little bit, got to college, shut it down even more. And then in my 20s, I couldn't shut it down anymore. And I think a lot of it was just and maybe other people could relate to this, but I could feel the energies around me. I just didn't really know what to do with them. And it was like, it was getting crowded. It was getting crowded. And it was as if I needed to open a door again. And so that's when I started working with that first teacher and mentor and the psychic who was working with police departments. And during that training, I realized that was not the work I was meant to do. I was not going to be working with police departments, but I did want to keep that door open.
And how did you find that mentor? Why did that mentor decide to take you on? Was he or she running the school for police psychics with a small ad that you could answer in the LA Times, or did you meet by word of mouth? Or there must have been an interesting story there.
Yeah, that's a very good question as well. I believe that somebody said you should go see this woman. I think that's how it started like that. So I went to see her. We had this conversation. She said, "Oh, by the way, I'm having a class. Do you want to come?" And so my best friend and I at the time, we decided to go to the class. And I don't know what possessed me, but I dragged my younger sister, bless her. I dragged her to the class. And after the first night, we sat in my bedroom at the house where I was living. And we just stared at each other. And she's like, I'm never going to sleep again. So anyway, but anyhow, so, and then this beautiful mentor, I just kept taking class after class after class and just learning as much as I could because that's who I had on the journey at the time. And by then I'm in my 20s, I'm 21, I'm moving on in my life. And astrology was always there. Numerology was a favorite from the time I was probably 15. I was doing numerology. I loved numbers and how they could share, again, their symbols. And there was this beautiful language that somebody had decoded. Numerology, you probably know this better than I do, but I believe, we can go back to the Greeks, we can go back to the Islamic Empire. Numerology has been around a very, very long
Oh,
time.
it's way older. All of these things that, as far as we can trace them, go back to Sumeria,
Yes, yes, of course.
which is also where most of our mathematics comes from.
Yes.
And that's 6,000 years ago. And when I was at university studying history and archaeology, the accepted wisdom was that that was the first civilization. And I remember thinking, along with a lot of other people, that seems awfully recent, given that, and then there were all these unanswered questions like, oh yeah, and we just like suddenly invented agriculture. Like, there seem to be some missing links here. And now, of course, they're finding like Göbekli Tepe in southeast Turkey, which is about 6,000 years earlier than Sumeria. And now they found another place in Indonesia whose name is so complex I can never remember it, which seems to be older than that. And therefore, what's going on, because you've got ice ages in between. And then, of course, you get into all kinds of theories. And then the academics get very upset. But the fact is that now with ground penetrating radar and all sorts of other ways of doing archaeology that are also not necessarily being seen through the institutional eyes of Judeo-Christianism or the British Empire or whatever other thing we're trying to prove, we seem to perhaps not have been the first such civilization here, possibly. And there seem to be pauses and breaks and a slightly more complex story, which is more in line with how nature really goes. And does that mean that there's extraterrestrial stuff and all that stuff? We don't know, but it's as likely as not. And so therefore, where does this all start? Probably earlier than Sumeria. But in terms of can we trace it back, that's about as far as we can actually get, like something on a clay tablet,
Yes.
that
Yes.
says,
And
if you do this, it will do that. Yeah.
it's amazing. So archaeology was my first love, and I actually
Mm,
thought I was going to study archaeology in college,
mm.
but then I went a different direction
It's
as
actually a good
life
job you didn't,
does.
because they're a bit of a bunch of wankers, honestly. I was almost kicked out of university for. Do you know why they wanted to kick me out?
Yeah, I'd love to know.
Well, one of the reasons, there were a few reasons, but one of the reasons was I wrote an essay about a sort of early Iron Age, no, mid late Iron Age culture that was in an area of Eastern Britain that was heavy iron making
Mhm.
along the River Nene, and that this became something that the Romans, when they invaded, targeted because it was an iron making, and so it was sort of an early industrial thing. And so I drew a comparison between that and sort of a Iron Age black country being like the early industrial revolution in 19th century England. And my professors just lost it, hauled
Hmm.
me into their office and kind of tore me a new asshole, threatened me with kicking out. And I'm like, but lads, you're talking about metal work, slag heaps, pollution in the rivers, smog, potentially people dying of lung problems because of the smoke, because that this seems to show up
Mhm.
the skeletons and stuff that you did, the hair and whatever that you're digging up. And so how is it not actually a bit like that? And they just said, if you want to stay, you better shut up. So I realized very, very early that weirdly, archaeology has had an orthodoxy and a liturgy that's not far from the religious.
Yes.
And that comes for all sorts of philosophical reasons, but it means that it needs to be revised every 20 years. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point too, because I will say from various points of view, have you read The Chalice and the Blade?
No.
Have you read The Great Cosmic Mother?
No, sorry. Where's the exam
Put
tomorrow?
that on
Am
your
I going to
reading
fail?
list. Okay. These
Tell
are
me about them.
anthropological texts. These are women-based texts, and we're really looking at how the patriarchy really radically shifted the narrative as far back as Sumeria.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
you
for
kind of
sure.
keep going back and back and back in time. You know,
Absolutely.
one of the members of our horse community, Sarah Barnes, wrote a great book, She Who Rides Horses. I don't know if you've read
I
that one
do know
either.
it, and I've actually got it in my bedroom. She sent it to me.
Yes.
Yeah,
Another great look back at history.
exactly. Well, I've got something to say about that. But before I do, for you listeners, remember we did say she's sort of the horse person's astrologer. We will get to the horses, don't worry.
Yeah.
One of the fun things about having, I studied ancient history as well. And I love the fact that when the Athenians got their empire going up through the Eastern Mediterranean above Turkey, they enter the Black Sea, they keep going, and they end up in the Crimea, right? That's on the top, and the steppes of Ukraine. And who's living there, of course, but horse people, and what they would call Scythians at that point, mounted archers, fierce warriors, also traders, and they start trading with these people for whatever they've got: pelts, horses, amber, etc., furs. And what pops up in the mythology of Athens? The Amazons. And that there are these women up there who are fierce and ride horses. So what do? They say, well, our heroes, Heracles and Theseus, what do? They go up there and they tame these horsewomen and they marry the queen, and
Right.
they get them under the thumb. They never fucking got them under the thumb. They were terrified of them. And in fact, when the archaeology was being done in those areas, digging up the grave mounds of these horse cultures, they were often finding these high status warriors covered in tattoos, buried with their horses, buried with their weapons. And because it's a slightly drier climate there, the skin often mummifies. And even though, it's from the Bronze Age. And more recent DNA has shown that at least 50% of these high status tattooed warriors buried with their
Yep.
horses and they were, guess what, women. And
Yes.
they were high status military leaders. And
Mhm.
so you can imagine the Greeks going up there and going, "Whoa, listen, lads, we can't let the ladies back in Athens see this. They'll go fucking nuts and they'll go wild. We had to come up with a couple of myths about it." But no, they never tamed them. And
No.
it's very interesting that the horse cultures have always been, to a large degree, egalitarian, because once you're on a horse, it's got nothing to do with your physical size or strength. It's to do with your skills with the horse, and then your skills with the weapon on the horse. You could be 5'2", you could be 6'2". It wouldn't really make much difference, honestly.
Mhm.
We know this. So the horse is much stronger than either of the two monkeys, big monkey, small monkey. So
Yep.
yeah, no, absolutely with you. And yes, patriarchy couldn't handle it. So
Nope.
yeah.
Well, and I noticed you had a YouTube recently about one of the horse goddesses.
Yeah,
And yes,
all of them.
and
Yeah.
when we think about, and coming from a more Celtic origin from my ancestors and Viking origin, the women, the female goddesses, they were not to be trifled with.
Well,
These were powerful,
to be fair, not
powerful
nor with the
women.
Greek ones as well. I mean,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
goddesses are always trouble.
Yes, we are.
Doesn't matter
Let's
which
just keep
pantheon.
that
Yeah.
in mind.
You
It's
better keep your head
true.
down. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, and we should talk about horses. I know we will. I
Yeah.
promise we'll get to the rest of the story,
Yeah,
but
how is it that you are now? Because that's sort of how I got to know you through Warwick. You are the
yeah.
sort of horseman psychic and the horseman's astrologer. Why? Like, what's the evolution there?
Well, that is also an interesting story. I feel comfortable because people have shared this. Normally, I would not speak about my clients, but I feel very comfortable because Warwick has already shared this. Robin's already shared this, and Tyler's already shared this, the Schiller family. But when I was living in Santa Cruz, I had a business where by the time, we fast forwarded now many, many years,
Mm,
I was doing astrology, numerology pretty regularly. That was the basis of my livelihood.
mm,
And so a client brought Robin, we had a session for a particular reason for that. And then Robin came by herself, and then Robin brought Warwick, and Robin brought Tyler. And
Okay.
so we had a little family going on there. And in the course of those sessions, I was able to share what I can see. And so the chart itself, astrology, is very technical. I am not a technical astrologer. I can do technical astrology, but where my gift lies is being able to utilize it as a symbology that opens the portals to information and energy. So yes, I'm interpreting astrology that has a traditional meaning, but not unlike tarot cards, for instance. You know, there's a traditional meaning for a tarot card, but really what the card is doing is it's asking you to connect with your own intuition. It's asking you to connect with your psyche, your higher self, your ancestors, depending on where you come from in the world, and let that information flow through you. So astrology charts allow me the opportunity to hear and see and feel. So with the Schillers, particularly Warwick, I was able to share what I could see. And from that moment, and I can't speak for him per se, but I know from what he has shared that he was able to craft what became the Journey On podcast, and then the Journey On summits, and then their new nonprofit foundation work. So that's how I came to be connected to the Schillers. And the podcast, and this is very kind, in the very first podcast, he shares that that's the origin story for where the podcast
Okay,
comes
that's so interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then later I was, what was I, podcast number 99, Agent 99. I was interviewed and we had a really great conversation. And from that interview, my whole world got to be this fabulous, fabulous people who are not unlike me. Like for the first time, because you asked about feeling alone. It's never really bothered me that there weren't a lot of people around that were seeing, feeling, sensing, doing astrology. I just would do it. It's just what I did. But living in Santa Cruz, you would think, Santa Cruz, California, for those of you who don't know, it's like the surfing capital, a pretty easygoing place. You would think I would find more people like me. I did, but it still wasn't a lot. And it's fascinating to me. The minute I stepped into this horse world, and I can't say enough about this, the sensitivity of the people who, I might even cry because this is so profound. The sensitivity of the people who listen to their animals, to their horses, their dogs, their cats, their chickens, their ducks, is the sensitivity that I've carried my whole life. And we're the same. The difference is I've been able to strengthen a muscle over the course of my life that for some feels like a newer muscle, but it's been there the whole time. Anyone who is in your community, anyone who's a horse person in the way that you are, in the way that your people are, understands how important it is to listen first. And that's the thing, like Robin, Warwick, Tyler, I started to realize these people are listening. They're not telling, they're listening and they're connecting and they're having conversation with. So that one podcast opened a door and I was very, very, very happy and feel very blessed to walk through that door. So that's how that happened. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to take that conversation in a moment into the equine realm because everyone I know is interested in this. However, I want to still just go a little bit more with your chronology. So you are working with this mentor who's doing forensic psychic work effectively,
Yes.
right? And we know that this is a thing, and it's interesting. Anyone who's rolling their eyes, don't. It doesn't matter what country you're living in.
Yeah.
Your big police departments all have a psychic forensic thing,
Very good.
and they leave no stone unturned. And it's really interesting that, people that you consider to be the most practical of the practical cops
Mhm.
will actually, because they are so professional, not neglect any angle that's possible to try to, and sadly, of course, criminals do the same thing. They can use darker spiritual stuff as well. But don't for a moment think that that is not part of your local police department, or at least your.
True.
We know that it is. So, at what point do you say, okay, that's not what I want to do, and then you say, but there is something I want to do. What is that thing? Or do you actually try your hand in the mainstream for a bit and resist it?
Oh, I was definitely, I was needing to get a job. So I had many jobs.
Mm,
I did my part. And I finally landed on teaching, partly because remember when I was saying that when I couldn't read and then the key
mm,
unlocked and I was able to read, I knew at some point I always loved teaching swimming lessons. That was my favorite job ever in college, was teaching kids how to swim. I mean,
okay.
I feel like that's what I'm doing now. It's just a different set of
Yeah, I
tools,
could see
but it's
that.
the same thing. So in my 20s, I was introduced to another psychic, and she was doing more past life regression readings, talking to people on the other side, which the other one did too. But she was doing it differently. She wasn't working for police departments. Let's just say that. So it had a different feel to it. It wasn't as, I mean, it was serious, but it just didn't have the same flavor. So I started working with her and learned so much that I was practicing in all my 20s. I was doing, I mean, at that point, people were coming in the middle of the night, waking me up and saying things like, please pray for me and contact my mother in law. So I had all kinds of experiences in my 20s. I needed to understand what was happening. So I found teachers to help me understand what was happening. The astrology was not a thing. It wasn't until my 30s that astrology, again, computers made it a lot easier. I'll
Mm,
be honest. I didn't really want to do the charts the way my mother did them. It takes
mhm,
a lot of time and effort. But, anyways, I can remember when Astrodienst showed up on the internet. Well, the internet showed up, right?
mm.
And then we had all of this new stuff that we could learn. And so I just started learning even more astrology at that point. So I'm in my 30s at that point and practicing on anyone who would let me practice. And I had left teaching, I was coaching, doing life coaching. And I found that my clientele seemed to all be artists. And I also started casting their charts with their permission and realized that we could go a lot further, a lot faster if we started with the chart. And so that's how that became a thing. And so that was 30 years ago. And I've just built on that since.
Okay, and then why would I've got 3 or 4 questions I've written down here, which need to get to, but another question has come up as a digression. So why would the Schillers, as dedicated horse people, okay, you're all living in that part of California, I get it, and sometimes people want to go and see a psychic or an astrologer, I get it, but I presume that there were other witchy people in the horse community there. In fact, I know there are because I've got friends who are, and we probably have a mutual friend there. Do you know Jill Cohen?
No,
One
personally, but yes,
wonderful
yes,
body, wonderful
yes,
human.
yes,
Warwick certainly knows her.
yes,
But we let's just say there's a very conscious community there, which also includes horse people.
yes.
So why do you think that they knocked on your door? What do you think was the why you?
Well, we have to say it's Robin. Robin came with a friend
Mm,
and so then I guess it just, I think
is it pure coincidence or is it some other connection?
that's a great question. It's nothing's ever pure
We
coincidence.
understand this, right?
Yeah,
So,
we just have to say, I think that what has happened, probably, I like to make things practical.
uh-huh.
And I think that practicality is an important piece of, especially if you're talking about business, if you're talking about your livelihood or you're talking about your
Mm,
purpose, how can it be practical? That's my
mm.
whole goal, is to bring the practical into the spiritual. or bring the practical into the spiritual. I count my lucky stars, no pun intended, but I do think that I'll be honest. This is me. If Tyler listens to this, Tyler, this is me responding to you at the San Antonio summit. That's all I'm going to say. I think the past life connection goes to Tyler. I think I somehow am connected to him, and that he just happened to be the child of these two
Got it.
wonderful
That'll
people.
do. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
And that actually leads me to my other question. So past lives, it's interesting for me because I obviously have spent a lot of time with healers and shamans
Mm-hmm.
in indigenous areas, and not just as an observer, but as it's been my life and my son and the healings in my family and all of this. And the Bushmen, for example, who I spent most of my time with, so they don't talk about past lives; they talk about ancestors. And it seems to past life things seems to be something which people talk about largely in Western, sometimes in Eastern, but by no means in all Eastern traditions. As you know, if you followed any of my work, I'm an autism dad, and we have a whole career before this podcast in helping people with neurodivergence, either who are professionals in the field. Are you a therapist? Are you a caregiver? Are you a parent? Or are you somebody with neurodivergence? When my son Rowan was diagnosed with autism in 2004, I really didn't know what to do. So I reached out for mentorship, and I found it through an amazing adult autistic woman who's very famous, Dr. Temple Grandin. And she told me what to do. And it's been working so amazingly for the last 20 years that not only is my son basically independent, but we've helped countless thousands of others reach the same goal, working in schools, working at home, working in therapy settings. If you would like to learn this cutting-edge neuroscience-backed approach, it's called Movement Method. You can learn it online. You can learn it very, very simply. It's almost laughably simple. The important thing is to begin. Let yourself be mentored as I was by Dr. Grandin and see what results can follow. Go to this website, newtrailslearning.com. Sign up as a gold member. Take the online movement method course. It's in 40 countries. Let us know how it goes for you. We really want to know. We really want to help people like me, people like you out there live their best life, to live free, ride free, see what happens. So why do some people talk about past lives and others not? And does every human have past lives or only some? And why do some cultures not seem to have it in their experience and others seem to have it very much in their experience?
Such a great question. Again, love these questions. This is fun. I cannot claim to be an expert on past lives, but I can put you in touch with one later. I'll give you her name. She's awesome. I think you would enjoy talking with her. But what I will say from my own experience and from my own learning, I think, and this is not shared by a lot of people who do psychic readings. So what I'm about to say is this is my own experience. I believe that a lot of times we reincarnate past lives within our ancestry. And it's not always true. And for sure, it's not always true, but I think that sometimes we do. So your question about why do some cultures look at past lives and some don't? I wonder if the ones that are, and this again, it's a question. I wonder if the ones that are truly connected to the ancestral realm, that it's all built in there. We are our ancestors. This is that thought. I know that there's a Hawaiian spiritual tradition that I've studied for a long time. The Amakua, that word means ancestors. It also means our higher self, and it's our wisdom. And in that spiritual tradition, they don't talk about past lives so much either. That's not a thing. So it makes me I'm having this conversation with you in real time and just really going into the curiosity myself of why this is. And again, you could talk to a past life expert and maybe there's a different understanding. But my understanding is for myself that if I go back and look at the lifetimes that I sense or feel that have moved through in some form, they're there to teach me something. And again, what is the practical purpose for getting in touch with a past life? A lot of it is healing. And if that healing can be sent to my ancestral line, if it can be moved through, you've heard of family constellation work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you can move the healing through the line, then it doesn't really matter if it's a past life or not, but it's something that is allowing me to have healing. And it allows me to understand something else about my soul's development, which then takes us into the question about what is a soul and what does it really mean to be this soul that keeps coming back? And are there souls that have never been here on Earth before? Probably, I would imagine. You know, we always have a good laugh because we think about, I have this story I have to tell you. We have these thoughts like, okay, so who were you in a past life? And everybody wants to be somebody really important in a past life.
Well,
And
that's the thing that always
yeah,
makes one raise an eyebrow. People seldom say, "Well, I used to clean the toilets in McDonald's in like 1964."
right.
You know, they, they don't say
Well,
that, do
I
they?
know.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So when I've done my past life work in the form that I've done it, always a camel boy, never a pharaoh. Can I just say that?
Yeah.
Always a camel boy, never a pharaoh. So that having an understanding of what is the purpose of looking at our past lives, a lot of it is to heal something systemic that may have followed us. Again, you have to really be okay with reincarnation, which then takes us back to, again, as you said, obviously there's clearly many, 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 many people throughout history who have talked about reincarnation. But you have my first introduction is through Edgar Cayce. So obviously that idea of the soul, the many lives. And then remember Dr. Brian Weiss, who did the Many Lives, Many Masters. Did you ever read that book?
No, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was another thing that came along during the times when I'm learning all of this. And I recently had a past life regression, just very recently in the last month. And I was really hoping. I was like, oh, I want to go get in touch with one of my Celtic lifetimes because I know I must have lived and blah, 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 you know. So no, that wasn't it. The lifetime that came through was vastly different than anything I would have expected. And the question was, why? You know, why this lifetime? Why was this coming through? And really, I realized even while I'm going through the regression, that the truth of it was I needed to see a simple lifetime connected to the earth, to the stars, and I needed to see and feel death. Here we come back around to that because we're going to talk about your near-death thing that you mentioned earlier. I've got it on my notes. So
Sure, I can talk about it. But go on. Yeah, okay.
yeah. So anyway, so again, what is the practical? A lot of people in my life have passed. A lot of really close people have passed recently.
Mm,
And so I needed to have that regression to show me something about death from
mm,
my perspective.
mm.
And it was great. And I mean, for me, whether the story is true or not, it doesn't really matter. It was beautiful and it was healing.
Right.
And I don't need to prove it. And I think that's something I want to speak to, actually, if that's all right. I hear so many people in the community say, I need to prove my intuition. And you know what? No, you don't. That kind of takes the wrong path. You're not here to prove your intuition. You're here to deepen into it.
Mm.
That is, and you know this.
Well, I mean, that's interesting. There's the horse connection right there.
Mhm.
Because what do horses do but facilitate that for people?
Right. Right.
More so than just about any other animal.
Why
Because
don't
they
you say
carry
more
us.
about that? Say
Well,
more about that.
okay, well, horses do a number of things for us that other animals don't. Every animal has its special
Mhm.
thing, and a lot of their special things are completely, of course, independent of us. We just see it through our own monkey lens.
Mhm.
But when we're looking at through the monkey lens towards horses, what do horses do? They carry us. Okay. Now, they're not the only animal that carries us. You can ride camels, elephants, donkeys, reindeer. But my daughter recently rode a
Who
sheep.
might have been your
Who
sister in a
might have been my
past life.
sister. Actually, I slightly suspect she was. And
Yeah.
I slightly suspect she's actually my older sister. But she's too wise, too clever. But horses, what they can do, when you ride the other animals, you ride in two dimensions. You ride forwards or in a curve. Maybe you could back up. With horses, you can ride in three dimensions. So that's why they became the livestock and battle and dance and sport and hunting transporter of humans of choice. But because they can move in three dimensions, they're much more complex and dangerous. Once you add that other dimension of movement, it becomes more dangerous. Horses are dangerous, but they're gentle. And so very, very rarely do they want to hurt us, but danger is always present when you're with a horse. So, but they will take you into another dimension and they will do it selflessly and they will do it against their own intuitions, like that cavalry charge, the horseback. I think I'm probably going to die, but they'll do it. So there is a kind of, they represent to us a higher self, a selflessness. They carry us. They also represent strength, freedom, beauty, speed. We are bigger, stronger, more powerful, more beautiful when we're on a horse. We just go back to being a monkey again when we get off the horse. So sometimes we can sadly come to the conclusion that the beauty and power that the horse lends us is our own and not something that it's lent. And that can turn us into utter arseholes. And a lot of horse people, myself included, have gone through a time in their life of arrogance. And then you've had to lose it at some point if you want to get to the next stage of horsemanship. Right. And it's almost like a necessary thing. And actually, to be honest, horses kind of can show that up with that sort of ego as well, a little bit amongst each other. That's not a million miles away in some of their dynamics. So there's these kinship similarities. But at the same time, we are their predator and have been for an awful long time. If you look at the, cave paintings in Lascaux or Vey or any of the really old ones from second ice age back or so, horses, 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 horses. We're not riding them, we're hunting them, but we have a real fascination with them. And then when we do start riding them, of course, they transport us massively. But unfortunately, we can commit acts of great criminal, psychotic, horrible genocides on them, or we can use them to heal. The choice is up to us. The horse will lend us his power either way. So horses really do have this occult thing. Now, so does a wolf, so does a dog, so does a cat, so does there's no being on the planet that does not have its, occult,
That
otherworldly
is true.
thing. But it's specifically with horses, I think it seems to me to be this. And you trust your life then to the animal.
Yes.
He will carry you on his back with this ever-present danger, and then you have to open yourself when you sit on a horse. As you know, the human body, when it feels danger, wants to curl in, grab the branch and hold on to the branch, protect the organs. You cannot do that on a horse in movement. You will fall off. So you have to learn to go against your instinct and open and balance. So it teaches us this. And of course, all of the old masters who wrote books about three-dimensional horsemanship, which you could call dressage. For example, Xenophon, the Greek. It seems that maybe Kikuli in Babylon, about 1,000 years before him, was talking about this. And certainly later people like Pluvinel and La Guérinière and others, what they all say is if you're going to ride this animal and train this type of animal who is so sensitive and so dangerous and so vulnerable, to that level, you have to learn to master your emotions. So it's a very, very good exercise, particularly for hot-headed young people, to do this, because it can turn them into courtiers, ambassadors, good rulers, good administrators, people that can be quite wise. So I think for all of these reasons, horses, and this is just, peeling back one layer, really. That's my long-winded answer. Sorry.
No, I love it. And I don't have your experiences at all. and limited experiences with horses in general. But one thing that has always struck me, I was just,
And your point, by the way, about the deep listening, he said,
yes,
interrupting her and not listening, is absolutely true. That because
yes,
if you don't, you can
yes.
die.
Well,
You
yes. Okay. So
really
that kind of,
have to listen
yes,
deeply. Yes.
this is good. I actually was actually where I was headed in a way. I was with a horse recently. And every time I'm with a horse, here's what I notice as someone who's on the ground, who's not on a horse. My heart and their heart are lined up.
Mm. Mm.
We're right here.
That's true.
And there is no other animal that I have been in contact with
Well, I
where
suppose large
that's,
cows, elephants, yeah. If
well,
if you
as I
stand on the
say,
ground with them, you're within a
yes,
heart field, yes. But that
yes.
doesn't take away from what you're talking about. No.
No, but I think for me, because again, cows, I like cows too, actually. I
Mm.
haven't been around a lot of cows, but I just find them fascinating to talk to. But this heart energy, that's what I noticed is that I could feel within myself, their hearts are,
Yes.
I don't, anatomically, I don't know if they're big. I don't know how big
They
they are,
are. They're
but
much bigger than ours. They
okay,
have to
yeah,
be because they're running machines. So their
that
hearts
makes
and their
sense.
lungs
Right.
are huge. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sitting receiving this energy at a heart
Mm.
level. There's not much I can do except let go of any fear, but be wise. Like you said, you have to be smart and conscious and staying present. But to open up and allow that, oh, it's just profound. So that's
Yeah.
my experience is this way.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And, the people at the Heart Math Institute in Northern California would corroborate and put science to what you say. And interestingly, even as far back as the early 90s, there was this really interesting study done at the University of Kassel in Germany, of all places.
Mhm.
You can imagine the Germans, we will, measure the
Yes, the
photon,
measuring.
the
Yes.
thing of hearts. That's not a very
Yeah.
particularly German thing to do. And I've lived in Germany, yeah, and I've
Yeah.
actually lived in Hessen, where Kassel is. So I was quite surprised that
Yes.
that was what they came up with, but good on them. And they found that hearts throw out all hearts throw out photons, light,
Yes.
to quite a large radius.
Hmm.
And of course, when we're in fear, that radius gets much less. But when we're in a state of love, and they measured this by putting people in situations where they felt nice and were feeling loving
Hmm.
towards someone imagined or somebody in the room or whatever, and
Hmm.
they could measure the length that the photons went, and they went really far. I can't off the top of my head say where they stopped being able to measure them.
Yeah, there's
But
a
just because
field.
they stopped being able to measure them at that point doesn't mean
Right.
that they so and then interdimensionally, presumably. And of course, what is light but love? Because what
Right.
is anything but love?
Right.
Right. And what is the heart anyway? Well, we know. So yes, I absolutely agree with you. If you're standing next to a horse and you focus on love, things are going to go well. And of course, you could say, well, that's anything, Rupert.
Yes. But it's
But
real. This is
yeah.
a real thing. It's measurable. And I have had the profound good fortune to work with Kansas Carradine, who
Oh, yeah.
combines,
Excellent human. Yeah.
yes, and just witnessing her, and she's done some work with me online that we've done with heart math, but I know her combination of heart math and working with horses is really profound.
Absolutely.
And
Everybody
yeah.
who's listening, go check out Kansas Carolyn. I did a conversation with her. Warwick did a conversation with her, but go to circuscowgirl.com,
Mhm.
check her out and consult with her. She
Yeah.
will help.
And again, that real field of energy, it is measurable, just as you
Yeah.
were saying. It's profound. But I
And
guess from my experience, just feeling it, oh, it's just amazing. It
so
just
I'm
feels
wondering
so
if
good.
back to charts,
Charts. Okay.
cards,
Charts and
symbology.
horses. Do we want?
Well, what is a chart but a measure?
Mm-hmm.
What is a tarot card but a symbol, a set of
Mm-hmm.
symbols that helps to
Yeah.
measure or interpret? What are meters and light
Mhm.
photovoltaic measure?
Yeah.
Record. They're all attempts to measure, and you can say,
Mhm.
well, the ones that are not empirical can't be real. But if that's true, then there would be no irrational side to life. And we know that there is. We know that 50% of life is rational, 50% of life is irrational. That is just how it is. Doctors with bad bedside manners kill their patients, and doctors with great bedside manners who didn't do so well at medical school, their patients tend to get better.
That's
We can't
correct.
measure this,
Yeah.
but yeah, but maybe we can someday. Interestingly, actually, my own uncle, who was an eminent pathologist at London University, and a man who would not be at all afraid to mock you at the dinner table if you thought that you were full of poo. When we made the Horseboy movie, and we had a little private showing of it to family, and he came, and I thought, oh, he's going to take a big shit all over me. So I went up to him at the end, and I opened an imaginary umbrella, and I got under it, and I said, "Now's your time, Uncle Peter. Take a shit. Go on, surfs up. Give it both barrels. Let's have it." And he
Yeah.
said, "Actually, Rupert, this time I'm not going to take a shit." And I said, "Well, that's unlike you. Why would you not?" And he said, "Well, two things. One is, remember, this is 20 years ago almost. You're saying that autism can actually be kind of a good thing. Well, that's kind of interesting, actually. Haven't looked at it that way before. That bears investigation." And he said, "But the second thing is, you've drawn attention to the irrational side of medicine." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I'm a pathologist, and so what you're looking at is probably the placebo effect." And I said, "Oh." He said, "Don't get me wrong, that's no disrespect." He said, "Rupert, most people misunderstand the placebo effect.
Hmm. Right.
They'll dismiss something, say, oh, that's just the placebo effect," meaning they fundamentally don't understand what the placebo effect
Mhm.
is. He said, all of modern medicine, all of allopathic drug-based medicine relies upon this irrational thing, because you
Mhm.
have a drug trial, you have control groups. One of the control groups does not get the drug, it gets a placebo. And it's not until in multiple trials the drug makes more people better than the placebo that
Ha.
it can go on the market. And these people that get the placebo don't just like think they get better and die 2 weeks later. They get better, and they usually get better more than the drug. And then they have to keep bringing the drug back to the drawing board until it. And he said, nobody can explain why this is, Rupert. And so is it possible that why what you're experiencing with these shamans is a technology of harnessing that, which is goes back to the roots of what it means to be a human, and that perhaps one day science will catch up with it? And it's just I'm astonished, Uncle Peter, to hear you.
That you were.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think any really good scientist is mystical.
Yes,
And when you really talk to scientists, and they have to stay curious. Science isn't just about the facts that already are in existence. Is about what else can we learn
exactly. If you're a good scientist.
if you're a good scientist,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question for you, back to horses. So now that through Warwick and so on, so
Mhm.
many of the people that come to see you are horse people, I presume
Yes.
they're often coming with questions about their horses and
Yes
questions
and
about their
no.
relationships with their horses and so on, no?
Sometimes, not all the time. Sometimes it's about them and how they can actually be with their horses better, how they can
Okay, well,
develop
that's sort of what I mean, really.
yeah, yeah.
Can you give me, there must be patterns that emerge. What are the sort of patterns of the questions that tend to be asked to you? And what are some of the insights that come through you? Because one thing that's cool about you is because you're not horsey, you're not
Mhm.
coming with a horse people, we're all so opinionated and we all think we're right. And you know this. And
Mhm.
so it's very hard for us to look through a neutral lens, but you can because you're not horsey. So what are the main questions that people come with? And yeah, and what comes through for you when you answer?
That's a great question also. I think a lot of times people really want to deepen. So there's a couple of categories. There's those that come because they want to deepen their own intuitive ability so they can listen to their horses better. So we call that animal communication. That's a general term used. My job as an astrologer is looking at a chart and saying, well, from this natal perspective of where your planets started off with when you were born, here are the gifts that you are carrying and you can develop. And if that is something you want to do more of, here's how you can get there. Here's your trajectory of deepening in. Most of the time, I just have to say this, most of the time, people are already doing it. They just maybe just need somebody else to say, yes, this is real. You're not making this up. And I can look at a chart and say, like, we're the same age group. So our Neptune is in Scorpio. I can look at a Neptune in Scorpio and say, generally speaking, Neptune and Scorpio people have access to a tremendous amount of that other realm type of intuition or connection to your interest and willingness to dive into what we're diving into today and what you've been diving into your whole life. It isn't just from the Neptune in Scorpio. That's just one particular way I can look for it. I can look at where Pluto is in a chart. So I'm helping people understand themselves and understand their evolution as a soul, which then helps them relax, I hope, into being themselves and opening up to their natural gifts, which, just like you and I've been talking about, most people are naturally intuitive. I would like to say all people are naturally intuitive.
In my experience, I think all people
Yeah, I mean, and that
it's in our
whether
species. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, whether we shut it down or don't shut it down or develop it. So a lot of people will show up for that. Some people, another level of conversation very often is, I'm doing this healing modality with horses. How can I leave my regular job and start my work in this realm? So because of my background, which we're not going to go into all the details, but other jobs that I've done in other parts of my life, I love looking at people's paths of livelihood and paths of soul work and paths of devotion. And then if there's a way to connect our passion and what we love with a livelihood, then let's do it. And that's nuancing a whole different way. It also involves very much honoring and listening to a more spiritually supported path, maybe than a more materially supported path, although sometimes those two don't go together, obviously. But there's so many conversations that I have, and I love it because each person to a person, this just has always just made me feel, I don't even know, it just blows my mind, I guess. To a person, every horse person I have ever worked with goes back, listens to their recordings, takes notes, and wants to deepen their evolution of their soul. They want to become better people. They want to become better in relationship with their horses and their friends and family too. But,
But mostly the horses.
it's the horses. It's a nice side product,
Yeah.
side benefit that you get to be better at relationships in general. But it is that relationship. And I always bring it back to self. And I think people are really hard on themselves. And like I was saying before, when we're really hard on ourselves or we have too much expectation, we're going to shut down that intuitive side. It's the listening, it's the open, it's like you were saying with the heart. When you're on the horse, you're kind of forced into this openness
You
that
have to go to the other side of fear. You do.
yeah, and you talk about that dimension that the horses take you into, right? That's, I think, why I can connect with this beautiful community, is because you already know that there's another dimension beyond this. There's multiple dimensions beyond this.
Here's another question. When we look at astrology, we're looking at a solar system that has been known to us because we sit on this planet and we look up at the sky. But although recently, Pluto's been added to that, and we think other planets there may be this mysterious planet X or the ninth planet or
Oh
whatever.
yeah, there's quite a number now.
Right.
Yes.
And but in astrology, of course, these unknowns are not. Astrology is often presented as a sort of a fixed, like there are these planets, and they relate to the sun and the moon like this, and blah 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 blah. And often I'm wondering, yeah, but aren't there more? And
Yes, and
and
actually,
if there are,
yes,
what are they doing and why aren't they talked about,
yeah.
or how are they talked about? Or
I have been blessed with a mentor who this is his forte, looking at asteroids, looking at the moons of planets, looking at planets further out, looking at black holes, looking at everything that's astronomical
mm,
and how it can be interpreted astrologically. Astrology is actually a something that's evolving all the time. There is traditional astrology, and nothing wrong with that. It works really, really well. It's
mm.
powerful. But evolutionary astrology is something that where it's changing, it's shifting, it's growing. And I have lots of books here and behind me. There's also me looking at astrology from a different lens. You know, astrology, like everything else, has a very patriarchal lens. It has a colonial lens, if you will, to some
Not
extent.
entirely though. There is
Not
all sorts of.
entirely,
I'd say it's
but it
one of
has
the areas where you get a kind of a real, somewhat of a balance, do you not?
okay,
Depending on.
yes, yes and no. Venus obviously is well represented, right? Aphrodite, Venus, the moon is
Moon,
considered the more of a feminine. But I will just say this, and again, we don't have to,
but the planets themselves are mostly male.
they are, I don't want to belabor it, but
Although
this is really
interestingly,
good
in German,
information.
in German, the sun is female
Oh,
and
I
the
didn't
moon
know
is
that. That's
male.
cool.
Isn't that
Oh,
interesting?
I love it. As it should be. No, I'm fine with whatever it is. But there are asteroids, and astronomers have in recent years really focused on naming new objects after women goddesses in
Mm.
particular.
No, I've noticed that. Yeah.
What's really interesting is to look at some of these goddesses and then go back in time, pre-Sumeria even, and look at the matriarchal lens of something similar and just notice, it's just a noticing, how can this goddess who has come to us in a particular form, we could take Diana, a moon goddess, right? Artemis.
Mm.
In astrology, there is an asteroid, Diana, that we can track. There's Vesta or Hestia we can
Mm.
track.
Goddess of the hearth.
We can
Yeah.
track a lot of them in a chart. Juno is another one that we
Mm-hmm.
track a lot for relationships.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the patriarchal connection to Juno, they want Juno to, I'm not kidding, this is real. They want Juno to let women know that suffering because of her husband is part of the deal. It's just
Yeah, but
part of what happens.
she gets revenge all the
Oh,
time.
yeah, she gets
She does all
revenge.
sorts of horrible things too.
But if you go back earlier in time,
Yes. Yeah.
what they based Juno on was really an advocate of all people, but
Sure.
particularly women and children.
Sure. And just back to that, like the
Mhm.
Greek thing of inventing the
Mhm.
Amazons as people that had to
Mhm.
be conquered by their male heroes, when
Yeah,
in fact they were trading partners, and
yeah,
probably the people coming back on the ships
yeah.
from Scythia who had exchanged, with probably some high status female
Mhm.
warrior leader
Yeah.
tattooed. And the high status woman probably went away thinking, well, that was a good deal. I, made a bit of money there, and a bit puny, these Greeks, but hey. And the Greek went away going, oh God, they're a bit wild, aren't they? Well, but I got some good pelts there. Well, we can't have those people coming back to Athens. But yeah, I hear you. We have inherited a largely patriarchal
Yeah,
world.
and it's fine. It's just we
Yeah.
need to sort through it. So when we're looking at a chart and we're looking at how can these planets, which are, I mean, they're fascinating. How can these planets give us information? I have to look back and say there's thousands of years of support for this. This is a question. A lot of people have this question. How can the planets, which actually don't line up in the same way they did thousands of years ago, astronomically and astrologically, how does it all still
Mm.
work? It just does. And again, that's not a scientific answer at all, but it's just that when we look at the interpretation of how the sun, the moon, what was on the horizon, what we call the rising sign, what was on the horizon when we were born, how Saturn. Can I just talk about your generation just for
Sure.
a minute? Okay, so I'm guessing based on things you've said, you were born in the later part of the 60s.
1967.
Okay. So 1966, and 1967. So 1966, those people, fire horses, they're all in
And
their
I'm
fire
still a
horse
fire
year.
horse because
Oh,
I'm February,
cool.
yeah. So
Okay.
I've squeezed in
Interesting.
by a whisker, like a,
Well
and that was
done.
actually going to be a question of mine about A, how does the Chinese stuff marry up with the Western
Yeah.
stuff?
Okay.
B, Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, because it must
Oh,
be
yeah.
flipped on its
Yeah.
head,
They're
but
different.
no.
Yeah.
And C, yeah, let's talk. We want to talk about fire horses because it's the year of fire horse.
Okay. Well, I'll
But yeah,
try
no,
to.
I am a fire horse for sure. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right. I'm going to dovetail this in.
Okay.
So Western astrology, fire horse. I'll make a link here
So
at
I'm an
some point.
Aquarius fire horse. As you may know, if you've been following my work, we are also horsey folk here. And we have been training horses for many, many years in the manner of the old classical dressage masters. This is something which is often very confusing for people. We shine a light on that murky, difficult stuff and make it crystal clear. If you'd like to learn to train your horse in the manner of the old masters and really have fun and joy for you and your equine, go to our website, heliosharmony.com, sign up as a premium member and begin to take the Helios Harmony course, which will take you from 0 to the piaffe, where the horse is dancing on the spot, in hand, on the ground. And then from there, you can develop out to anywhere you want to. heliosharmony.com to unlock the secrets of the old masters.
Okay, that would make sense. You would have to be born in early
Yeah.
February of that
Yeah.
year.
February
Of
4th.
67. Okay.
Yeah.
So in 66, and actually starting in 63, building in 64, 65, 66, 67, there's a combination of two planets in Virgo, Uranus and Pluto, that are very close together. And then two
So
planets.
many jokes, so little time. Sorry.
And then in Pisces, we have Chiron and Saturn. So in your year and in 1966, and even in my year in 64, they're opposite each other in these two signs that represent. So very simply, this is very simple. Pisces would be, oh, look at that.
What happened there? And
How
why did that
soon?
happen?
We're having fun. This is great.
Did you see that?
Yeah, that was great. A little extra bonus from the other realms.
For those who are listening, a bunch of balloons just went up in our screens for no reason at all.
It's a gesture thing, but it never happens when I try to make it. It never happens when I try.
Other
It
realm.
only happens when the universe. Oh,
What? Reading glass?
It only happens when the universe makes it happen. Okay, so I have to say this. I have to finish this. So these planets lining up, right? Pisces is the healer, the compassion, the mystic, the spiritual, right? Virgo is healing. It's looking at the healing arts, it's service, it's work, it's devotion. And so in your chart, wherever they may be, they're opposite each other. And they create what I call a conduit that opens you up as someone who wants to bring the spiritual and a bit of the scientific, really, in some form, something very practical into the world that is going to help with healing. And we heal ourselves first. Virgo also represents a lot about psychology, mental, physical well-being. So this is the beauty of our astrology, is it gives us clues as to where we go in this lifetime. Why did my soul choose this lifetime? How do I want to evolve? And because of the balloons, I can't remember where we started this part of the conversation.
We
Blame it on the balloons.
I can't
Telling
believe
you
that
the universe.
happened. For those of you who are listening, a whole bunch, like 2 or 3 times.
It's never
beautiful
happened to me
balloons
before
just
like that.
went
Ever.
spontaneously up through both of our screens.
So the cosmos is saying, listen, this is to celebrate that. Okay, so fire horse.
Utterly celebratory. Fire horse.
Celebrating. Yes. Okay. So fire horses, 1966, early 1967. The fire horse, how does Chinese astrology, they're very different. They're extraordinarily different. I'm lucky that I know just enough to know just enough. But there are elements, I think, of the fire horse that bring a lot of resiliency, a lot of strength. Obviously, you've got some fire, so there's passion. You've got the horse. All of those qualities that you attributed to the horse are real in Chinese astrology. So when I combined them with the Western astrology and I look at this connection between the Pisces, Virgo, and then there's, a whole bunch of other things, obviously, in a chart, what I'm aware of is that fire horse people came here to really work in the healing realms with the chi, or the strength of this inner flame, this energy, this life force energy. So when a fire horse is not happy, when a fire horse is feeling a little down, they need to come back to themselves and do that inner healing and say, what am I not expressing? Because you are a conduit. This is who you are. This is how you're designed. And so how can you work with your life force energy, continue to create a greater capacity for that and keep going? And 60, the age of 60 is where I always feel blessed. If we get to live to be 60, how amazing that is
No
for
kidding.
us. And so what wisdom
Especially
can we
considering
then
how many
share?
times you said, hold my beer. Yeah.
Right. And you say you've got this Saturn and Chiron in Pisces very often. And what happens there is by age 59, which you must have just turned 59.
Yes. Yeah, I did.
Yeah. You're in your
Great.
Saturn return, which is to say Saturn is coming back to where it was when you were born.
Uh-huh.
And so it is your time to deepen into the lessons you've learned and to step into your wisdom. And something I really feel about horses, so again, kind of bringing more of that back into the conversation, I've always felt from the time I was very little that horses and whales were in particular wisdom keepers. One was in the water and one was on land. Now, obviously cats are, dogs are, every animal is a
I
wisdom.
often think of horses as land dolphins. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I love that. I love that. So the wisdom that those of you that are 59, 60, 61, when we get to that, if we are lucky enough to live into that age, it is, I think, important for us to really consider how we want to share our wisdom in the world. So then we can look at a chart again and say, well, how do we want? Kansas and I just taught a class with Kansas on Saturn, and I had brought Kansas in to do some heart math with us so we could connect with our hearts, because Saturn can feel very mental. But it's, again, being embodied, as you know from your work, being in your body is huge. Otherwise, the wisdom, it's not just here, it's everywhere. And so how do you want to live into your wisdom? So fire horses, I think it's your time to really, again, and I think, Rupert, for what you do and how you teach, it's exactly right for a fire horse right now. Don't get on the horse until you have made a connection. You're listening and you ask. Just because it's a fire horse here does not mean to go fast. And in fact, right now, while you and I are talking in early March, we're having a Mercury retrograde. The last thing anybody needs to do is get on a horse and gallop away right now.
Why? What is a Mercury retrograde, and why does it lead us to that conclusion?
Okay. So Mercury, it can lead us to many conclusions, but Mercury is our planet that moves the fastest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when it retrogrades, which is, again, it's engaging in an elliptical orbit that looks like it's going backwards in an astrology chart. But let me just say, it's not going backwards, obviously, in the sky. But Mercury gives us reminders about communication. Certainly, it relates to technology. It relates to anything, thinking, ideas. And the idea of a retrograde is a resting place. An idea of a retrograde is a place where we renew, we refresh, we review. We don't have to jump forward all the time. That would not be wise, right? I mean, if
Why
we're
would
just
it not be wise?
Well, if you're constantly jumping forward, when are you ever integrating? Integration is where the wisdom comes from. Gathering knowledge is great, but if you don't take time to integrate it,
If you're eating all the time, you can't digest.
Hey, exactly. Exactly. I mean, that's exactly it. So we are at currently, when we're recording this, in a time where we don't want to move too quickly. But there will come times this year where we want to move quickly. The fire horse will say, "Yes, let's go for a ride. Let's go on a new
When does the
adventure."
Mercury retrograde end? And
For
then,
this time frame, March 20th. We have
okay, quite
three of
soon.
them. Yeah, three of them a year. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and for some of us, side note, just a little side note, I was born with natal Mercury retrograde, which there have been some studies done that people born with a Mercury retrograde have a little neural diversity often. Brains work a little differently. During Mercury retrograde, my brain works really well. It's a great time for me to write. It's a great time for me to get things done. I'm working on my taxes. It's fabulous. The rest of the time, I go slow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting. Okay, here's a question.
Yeah.
Most astrology that we know of, or all astrology that we know of, that comes out of the northern hemisphere. So I've often wondered, and my family's South African. When we look
Right.
up at the sky down there, it's completely different.
It is completely
I mean, it's not that we don't have some of the same heavenly bodies, but we have
different.
other heavenly bodies down there that don't appear up here. The Southern
Yeah.
Cross is an obvious one, and some crossover. So Orion is there, the Pleiades are there, I guess the planets are there. So, but of course, the seasons are reversed. So, is astrology reversed down there?
Wow. All I know, I have my mentor, Philip Sedgwick, in my head. I wish I could channel him right now. The easy answer for me is it works because there's an adjustment in astrology that makes it work. So when you're putting in the time of birth, which is latitude and longitude and time of birth are vital for a chart. So when you're putting in latitude and longitude, the chart automatically adjusts in the way it needs to for me to be able to read it.
Oh, I see.
But see, Philip, he lives on this side of my head. For those of you that can't see, I'm gesturing to my left for no good reason other than Philip living over here in my head. He would know why. He could tell you the exact technical.
Who is Philip, by the way?
Philip Sedgwick is this very interesting astrologer who lives in Arizona.
Should we be talking to him?
You would probably love talking to him.
Philip Sedgwick.
Yeah, he's really interesting. And he looks at black holes, galactic anomalies, and astronomy. And I think as an astrologer, it is, he has brought something into my awareness that a lot of other astrologers don't study. So I've always appreciated that. I have a lot of excellent mentors. I really believe in mentors.
Can you give us a bit of an idea of what he says about the anomalies, the black holes, the asteroids, and so forth?
In my very simple way, I can say it from my own chart because he's taught me a lot through my own chart. So I wonder, do you know where your moon is in astrology?
In my own particular one?
Yeah, in your chart?
Does that mean you have to know what time you were born?
Yes. Or a day. I mean, for the moon, it just depends on the day.
Well,
It doesn't matter. If you don't know, it's okay.
1967, but I think it might have been a Saturday, and I can never remember whether my mum said it was 9 o'clock in the morning or midnight. I can never remember.
Okay, it doesn't matter. I'll just say it from where I am. So
Yeah.
when I was born, my moon was in Sagittarius at a particular degree. And that degree of Sagittarius correlates with a galactic anomaly of some kind. So he spends his time, and again, he's combining the astronomy and the astrology, and he's looking at what does a galactic anomaly or a black hole or something, how does that affect the personality? And so he has assigned some qualities to people like me who have, let's say, my rising sign is also a conjunct a black hole. He has ways of doing this. And what it does is I feel like for me, it says I am responsible. I have to be responsible about how I conduct myself in the world. And here's how my partner David would explain it.
More so than others? I mean, that could
Yes.
be anybody,
And I'll tell
but
you why. Because there's energy there. There's
Uh-huh.
energy there. So I'll give you a fun example.
Right.
David always talks about this every time, wherever
What
we
does
go.
David do, by the way?
Oh, he is a doctor of medical Qigong who also does a deep dive into Taoist inner alchemy.
Okay.
And so he works
Sounds
with,
like we should have him on the show. Okay.
yeah, you should definitely,
Yeah,
you guys would
definitely.
have a great
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
A
yeah,
lot of, really a lot of depth there. And again, looking at it from, again, the Eastern philosophies. So anyway, when I go into a place, if it's empty, like our local coffee place, if we walk over there in the morning, if it's empty, invariably within 2 minutes, it will be full. And this was a thing when I lived in Santa Cruz. I used to go to a particular chocolate shop that doesn't exist anymore, but they would have sipping chocolate. And I would go sit in the back so I could do my work and just be out of the way. And I would just watch as people just came in. That's a black hole effect. So how am I going to manage that? I'm going to just be very aware that I need to, and this is, I really, really believe this. I need to remember that I, like everybody else, is a vehicle of light and love. And I have to start my day, and I do this every day. I am a vehicle of light and love. And so are you, and so is everyone else. I just want to be more mindful that that is the energy that I'm channeling. Because if I'm not in a good place, it's not pretty.
Not
So
pretty, not pretty for people who come into your orbit. Not pretty for you. Not
pretty
pretty.
much, yeah.
Yeah.
Not a happy day for anybody.
Okay.
You know, but and I think all of us can make a case for that in general, because like we've been talking about, we do have these energy fields that come out from
Sure.
our bodies, right? So if anybody gets caught in that energy field, may not be a good thing. But I do think some of us, and again, Philip could obviously give you a lot more understanding of this, but the way our planets connect with these black holes, or the way they connect with the, the galactic, there's something called the galactic center and the supergalactic center. And I just happen to have a lot of planets connecting a lot of those together. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I want to go back to animals. So you've talked about some past life stuff, and we talked about ancestor stuff, and we know that to be a human in the wild state is usually to have a relationship with about 300 species. That is quite intimate, because we're also creatures, we're amphibious. So all the earliest sapiens stuff, there's previous humans that didn't really go much near the sea, but we are very much margin of land and water. So it's not just the land animals for us. Okay.
Right.
And when one hears people talking about past lives, it's interesting. They often talk about their time as another human, but I don't hear people talking about their time as a sea turtle, or their time as a boll weevil, or their time
Right.
as, and that could simply be because there isn't memory. But I presume that if we're talking about fields of consciousness and interweaving fields of consciousness, and that souls, in whatever way, and whatever souls are, move to some degree through these fields of consciousness. I imagine that two things. I imagine that if there's other dimensions, which clearly there must be, presumably we move through those. So we must have lives in those as well. And presumably we must go into the fields of consciousness of animals, plants, rocks, planets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
The
would agree.
time when I was Mercury, the time when I was an earthworm, the time when I was,
The winged messenger. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
time when I was an earthworm on Mercury. Well, that probably didn't happen unless it's a Mercury in
Yeah.
another dimension where it has an
Yeah.
atmosphere. But
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? It seems to me that there must be so much infinite diversity.
Agreed.
How is it? Is it just simply that because we're looking through this particular lens, when we're in a human lifetime, we're going to interpret it in that way?
Yeah. I want to be respectful too. There are certain cultures and spiritual traditions that really do think that human souls only reincarnate into human souls. So I want to be very respectful that is that is a teaching that comes through.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't my personal belief, let's say. I, like you, I'm thinking, well, think about it this way.
We must also be aliens sometimes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how do you know we're not right now?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing. That,
And yeah, if there's spores that come in from outer space and there's
right.
elements that come in from outer space,
We are
then there must be,
stardust.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the physical body, everything in us, our cells, that's a proven fact. We
No,
actually,
for sure.
yeah, that's scientific. But from a consciousness point of view, this is, again, this is one of my favorite things to talk about is, what is that really? If we
Yeah.
are all one consciousness on some level, and then we differentiate into these forms, I could have easily come back as this plant that's sitting next to me, or come back as in an animal's form, or like you said, the crystals, the rocks,
Mm.
everything has something in it. And I think as we get further along with our science, we are actually finding that out. That is actually being proven every day.
I would agree. How did I hear it brilliantly expressed the other day by some physicist or other? But anyway, one listens to these podcasts, but it really resonated with me.
Mhm.
Maybe somebody listening, you can put me straight if you heard this one too. That the idea is that if there is a field of energy or consciousness or love, and that is everything, presumably that permeates all dimensions,
Exactly.
because there's what is and what isn't. So what is must be love. Okay, so if that therefore must permeate all dimensions, all solar systems, all spiritual realms, all this and all that. My shoe, your
Yes.
glasses,
Yes.
my
Everything.
fingernail, the
Yes.
gravel outside there in my stable yard, which is old seashells, which is living matter, the plastic on my computer mouse, which is a fossil forest. The way it was explained was this consciousness, this love. If one thinks of it like an ocean, oceans come together with certain energies and form waves. When we look at a wave, we say that's a wave, like it's
Yes.
this thing almost a bit separate from the ocean, because it looks like the ocean is sort of that blue bit there, and that wave is that white bit that's going up the cliff there. But then when it crashes on the cliff and it goes back, it goes becomes the ocean again.
Yes.
But what creates the wave is a concentration of matter and energy within that ocean that makes it behave like that. And then you can have lots and lots and lots and lots of them all in community together. And those are like the wave people. But a few miles away over there, you've got the flat people.
Yes.
And up there, you've got the water vapor people. And, over there, you've got the rain people. But they're all the same.
Yeah.
They're just, and they can be, each one of those can be any of those things at any time. And that made perfect sense to me. It's like, I see. Yes. Light, for example, people often talk about matter being light. So we all know that molecules can be dense and create you or your sweater, or it can be less, close together and can be the coffee that you're drinking, or it can be really far apart, which can be, me cracking a fart here and filling the air with the smell of roses, just a particular type of rose that thrives upon, dead matter. Those are all molecules. And we also know that even solid matter is actually lots and lots of molecules dancing, vibrating with empty space in between. We know that that's measured. We also know that light is both a wave and a particle, depending on whether it's observed or measured. And so,
Yes.
so we also have to accept that ambiguity and simultaneous states of being must be the norm. And when we look at the ocean, we actually do, I think, see it in physical form.
Yes.
But because we're visual predators who tend to hone in on things, we tend to hone in on the wave or the still pool or the rain or the whirlpool, because we're always asking, how does that thing affect me and my survival right now?
Exactly. Yes.
Right. But it's a short-term focus, right?
It is. Yeah. It really
So
asks us to be wider in our lens and to be very, and again, I just take us back to the being a kid. Take us back to, what is it like when you're that wonderment? And I hope that's still happening for kids. Like, am I,
luckily, they're all born with it.
I hope so.
It's just whether or not how long is it allowed to go on. That said,
Yeah,
honestly,
because
that's
that's,
getting better. I
yeah,
think it was harsher when
good,
I was a boy.
good.
I think that kids actually have more leeway now, oddly enough, from what I can observe. They're certainly beaten less, you know.
Well, there's that.
That's progress, right?
Yeah.
I have a question for you too. You've talked about patriarchy, the patriarchal lens. You talked about
Hmm.
your mother, your grandmother. You have
Hmm.
talked about your husband. You haven't talked about your father. You haven't talked
Hmm.
about your grandfather. Can we?
Sure.
And so they have been absent from the conversation. Is that
Yes.
because they were antipathetic, or is that because they just don't enter the story?
Well, actually, interesting. I was raised by a single mother.
Ah,
My father was in Vietnam.
okay.
And when he returned, let me think about this. I was born, I think before he went to Vietnam, but not much before. So he wasn't around
And
from when
presumably
he
they married
first.
quite young then, if he was sent to Vietnam.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. They were very young. And so he wasn't around when I was born, or he was around when I was born, but not when I was young. He was briefly back and forth while he was in the service. When he got out of Vietnam, I think this was maybe the late 60s, early 70s, life was not pleasant. I had a very unpleasant childhood in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. And my parents split up, and that,
He was around for a bit then.
yeah. So having a lot of hardship. So when I was growing up, there I had some uncles who really were fabulous at stepping in at times. I did have two grandfathers, both of whom were Aquarians, actually. And one of them,
Ukrainian.
Aquarians, like you, an
Aquarians.
Aquarius.
Okay.
Yeah, not Ukrainians, but Aquarians.
Okay.
By
What are
the
you?
way, new information.
What are you?
What? Oh,
What are
I'm a
you?
Taurus.
Okay. Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm like, I'm the solid,
Okay.
you know.
Snorts, paws ground,
Yeah, yeah.
paws earth. Yeah. Lowers
So anyway,
horns.
yes. So
Yeah.
both my grandfathers were alive for a short bit when I was young.
Uh-huh.
But most of my grandparents died quite young.
Quite young. Mine too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my father was not in my life
Mm.
hardly at all for many, many
And then
reasons.
there wasn't a significant stepfather that came in to.
No, not at
Right.
all. And then, the partner I'm with right now, David, he's amazing, wonderful. I am very I love being able to be with someone who I can have these kinds of conversations
Mm-hmm.
with, right? And we can just dive deep into similar ways we see the world very differently. He's a lot more scientific than I am. And
Yeah.
he has a lot of, I think in a lot of ways, very similar to you. He studies, he dives deep into history and science, into archaeology. But like you, there's a philosopher there. There's someone who knows that spirituality and the mundane practical come together in a form. So we have been together about 13 years. So I feel very blessed. This
Mm.
era of my life has been very good. So when I talk about the patriarchy, I want to just be sure that people understand that men, not all men, are channeling some evil, domineering energy. Some might still be, but for the most part, I've been very fortunate to be able to
Well,
be
and I
around
think
men who
I
aren't.
think to be fair to all humans, toxic humanity
Ah, fair.
knows no
Good
gender.
phrase.
Knows no
Yeah.
gender. There can
No.
be
Yeah.
there can be different styles and flavors,
Right.
but it's not limited to one gender. You
No,
know?
it isn't. And
No.
actually, that's actually a really good point, and I think a very fair point to bring up. I think that toxicity of any kind, the struggles that humans have being
Mm.
on Earth,
It's hard to be a
in
human being alive on planet Earth
yeah,
sometimes. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It
it
is.
is. And so to have compassion, empathy, some days, I will be honest, some days it's hard to
Mm.
look at what's going on in the world right now
Oh, sure.
and find
Sure.
compassion and empathy for those who have power. But, and I will just underscore this, this is why I think that it's important for us to come back to, how is it that I am a vehicle of light and love? How is it that I, for each of us, how is it that we are vehicles of light and love? Because if we can continue to deepen, to grow, expand into our wisdom and into that frequency of love, then we are bound to make a difference. Even if there are those out there who have a lot of power who are not remembering that, I believe we still can make
Yes.
a difference.
There's a beautiful quote that I really like, which is by Marcus Aurelius, which is, or is it Epictetus? Can't remember. Someone will probably tell me in the comments. If you're listening to this and you do know, please do tell me in the comments. But which is, be like the vine, the grapevine. The grapevine doesn't care whether it's been a drought year or a rain year. And the grapevine doesn't care if you cut it or tread on it. It just keeps bearing grapes.
I love that.
And it fulfills its destiny to. Now back to horses. I feel that that is that vehicle of light and love. Vehicle. They allow themselves to be vehicles for us. That is an act of generosity. Sometimes they unload us, but for the most part, they are incredibly generously, selflessly tolerant and will convey us as vehicles. And they are vehicles of light and love because they allow us to pursue our dreams.
Yes.
That is what they do.
Yeah.
Given that there's a lot of horse people listening, and I'm sure a lot of them are going to contact you. Oh, and by the way, lads, anyone listening, I'm totally going to get over myself and get a reading from Denise. I'm terrified because I'm terrified she's going to tell me what I don't want to hear and, all of that stuff. Of course, as usual, Oh, great.
I won't tell you. Well, I might, but I'll do it in a way. I'll use my black hole energy and I'll do it in a way that will help you.
Oh, thank you so much. But I'm going to do it because all my mates have done it within the Journey On and Horseboy community, and they've all come back and said, Rupert, this lady is kind of the real deal. You should, So so we'll have that conversation afterwards, and so people are going to want to contact you, and we will absolutely give you her contact and all that in a few moments. But okay, so these horse people that are listening right now, if you could tell them, you've done charts for a lot of horse people now, and a lot of horse people that are particularly working within the desire to enter fields of consciousness with their horses and to enter the healing arts with their horses and so on, and to heal wounds of personal, and to try and be as good to their horses as they can be in the process. What comes through for you from that experience that you've been having the last few years that you would kind of say to every horsewoman listening to this?
I would say, trust what you hear, trust what you feel. And because I think that most people who contact me are so much further along in their journey than they give themselves credit for. There's I would say, a very big streak of perfectionism that runs through a lot of people in the horse realm.
I would
And
agree.
it comes from a commitment to wanting to be excellent. It comes from a commitment to wanting to do best for their horses, right? So it's not coming from a quote unquote bad place. And I would say, please be compassionate with yourself, be sensitive with yourself, treat yourself with as much love as you treat your horse.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Treat yourself with as much love as you treat your horse. Now, does that mean I have to apply that to myself?
Yes.
Oi.
I think we all need to hear this,
You're,
whether it's a
you're
horse, a
so right.
cat, a
You're so
dog.
right. You're so
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Treat yourself with as much love as you treat your horse. Brilliant, Denise. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. We've kind of hit the 2 hour mark here,
I know.
and we've arrived here like really fast with balloons.
Yeah.
So maybe this is the moment to sign off for this one. But because I'm going to definitely get with you and get the chart done, and then if I dare, we'll do another
Okay.
podcast. You know, I think it would be great for people to hear more from you. But I know a lot of people are going to want to contact you now. So please do the plugs. Please tell us how to contact you.
I think the best way to contact me is through my website, which is deniseelizabethbyron.com. It's a
Byron with
mouthful.
the Yron.
Yes,
As in
B-Y-R.
Byron. Yeah.
Yeah, like Lord Byron, who I'm not related to, but we'll talk about that story another time. We'll do that on a different podcast. But yeah, that's the best way. It's just through the website. Send me an email. I will respond to that email.
DeniseElizabethByron.com.
Yes. And I will respond. And
Super.
yeah, we'll see each other. I'm also found on Facebook and Instagram. I can get messages there as well, if that's easier for people.
Yeah. And similarly, yeah, if people are looking for things that it's not just about their chart, they probably maybe have questions about their horses. They maybe have, maybe there's stuff coming through with grief, with loved ones and lost ones and things. I presume that's all within your sphere.
Yes. It's not, it's something that often happens in a session. There's a variety of tools. I feel very blessed. I've lived enough decades now that I've acquired a number of tools to share, and I'm very happy to share them.
We just did, a wonderful podcast on grief with my great friend Carla Brahms, which I think resonated with a lot of people because, when you hit the 60 mark, people start to fall around you. And I mean, it's not that they don't anyway, but it's much more noticeable, obviously. And so I would encourage anyone listening or watching to bring that if that seems right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I look forward to hearing that podcast as well. It has been quite a time. And I would just say this, as far as the current astrology, I do have the Cosmic Compass conversations on YouTube.
Okay.
And I am trying to keep up with that as much as possible and talk to the planets and share a little bit more about the astrology. This is a significant year. It's a fire horse year, yes, but it's also a very significant year in astrology. So we are navigating through literally unprecedented time. And I don't know, maybe it's always that way, but I feel like for our lifetimes, this is probably one of the biggest years we've encountered, at least astrologically.
For sure. Certainly since 1945, I would say. Yeah.
I would say that, yes, you are correct. And let's just keep being vehicles of light and love as much as possible.
Yes.
Right now.
I'm with you there.
Okay.
I'm with you there. All right, Denise, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation.
It has, isn't it?
I knew it would be fun.
What a blessing, those balloons.
I know. I can't make it happen.
Has that happened to you before?
It has happened. It happens when I can't. Like if I want, like there's a way here, I'll show you.
And is it always balloons?
You can do this.
Uh-huh.
There's a thing, right? But notice nothing is happening, right? Wait, maybe I do this. There it is. See that?
Oh, my word.
You can, okay. There you go.
What?
But now that is the only one that I can actually make happen. I think technically.
Look at that.
I know, right? It's a great way. See, too bad people can't see that.
Well, they will because they're going to watch this on YouTube.
Oh, okay, great. They can see.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
I'm floored. Thank you. That's brilliant.
A great way to end. I love it.
What a way to end.
Okay.
All right. I'll be in touch. We'll do the chart.
Okay. All right.
Have a great rest of the day, my friend.
You too.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you did, please help us to make more. Please like, subscribe, tell a friend, give us a thumbs up. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, please go to my website, rupertisaacson.com. And if you'd like to find out about our certification courses with autism, education, horsemanship, everyday shamanism, there's a whole range of cool stuff. Putting a show together like this is not an easy task. If you'd like to support us, please consider going to our Patreon page and showing us some love there. Even the smallest donation, it really helps us to keep the good content coming. So go to rupertisaacson.com and click on the Patreon link. Not to mention our excellent merch. Please go to our shop and check out some of our really cool rock and roll themed merch, t-shirts, hoodies, all that sort of thing. rupertisaacson.com, it's all there. I can't wait for our next guest and also to meet you there. In the meantime, remember, live free, ride free.